Hey everyone! Today I'd like to talk about a theory regarding Franky, his origins, Pluton, and the possibility of him being Vegapunk's son or one of Vegapunk's creations. Before we continue, as a side note, I would like to inform you that this video is going to contain spoilers up to chapter 1053. I am aware that this has been discussed multiple times in the past by different people, and even Joyboy, one of the biggest One Piece YouTubers, made a video regarding Franky and his parents recently. I highly recommend checking it out. I'm gonna drop a link in the description. However, I'll try to explain a different approach. I consider that Vegapunk could be Franky's father, and I'll go into detail to explain what makes me believe that. First of all, let's take a look at what we know about Franky. In chapter 490, or episode 385, Franky reveals that he has reached the Grand Line through the reverse mountain from the South Blue. He also mentions that this happened more than 30 years ago. Knowing that his age pre-timeskip was 34 years old, this means that he was at least 4 when he entered the Grand Line. There's also an important mention earlier in chapter 354, when we have Tom talking about how he found Franky after he was abandoned by his parents, who were presumably some pirates. During those panels, we also find out that Tom took Franky in when he was only 10 years old. Later on, we get this confirmed once again during the flashbacks from chapter 967, which take place 26 years before the current events in the story. When the Roger pirates reach Water 7 again, Oden interacts with Franky, asking him if he wouldn't like to join their crew, to which his answer is no, because he had just been abandoned by pirates. During the time skip, we know that Franky got sent to Karakuri, the island which is the birthplace of Vegapunk and where one of his labs resides. This is also when we get to see Taroimo and a bunch of other cyborg animals which were acting as guards for the laboratory. Upon getting access inside, Franky had all of Vegapunk's research available in order to improve himself and learn as much as he could about the technology that was developed ever since the Doctor's early days. Although it's pretty unclear how did Kuma pick the places where he teleported the Straw Hats, Vegapunk would have directed him with some instructions while he was researching on him. In my opinion, Franky is the Straw Hat which arrived on the most fitting island for his character, with all the resources needed to improve and build upon the knowledge that he already had, which is hard to think of as a coincidence. When it comes to Vegapunk, I think we know more about what he has done rather than who he is. He created an army of cyborgs called pacifistas before turning Kuma into a complete robot. He manipulated devil fruits and their powers, he discovered different secrets and uses of Sea Stone, and he led the SSG project, which we still have to find out more about. In chapter 840, Yonji mentions how their father, Judge, was a brilliant scientist before they were born, and that he worked together with Vegapunk to develop the technology which is used by Germa 66 to enhance their own clone soldiers. This is possibly the same technology that has been used by Vegapunk to create the pacifistas. Almost 200 chapters later, during Wano, in chapter 1017, we've also learned that Queen was a part of their group, where all three of them worked as an illegal scientific research team called MADS. Given the fact that Reiju is 24 and she's the eldest child of the Windsmoke family, we can safely presume that Mads had to disband sometime over 24 years ago, when Franky was not older than 12. You probably already see where I'm going with this. Judge, Queen, and Vegapunk had to part ways because the Marines were already trying to capture them, but Vegapunk was the only one who got arrested back then from what we know so far. He has been working for the Marines ever since, and this could somehow explain or even justify why he had to abandon his own son in order not to put him in danger or allow him to be captured as well. I am aware that Franky mentioned that he was abandoned by pirates, but for the Marines, labeling people as pirates, even when it comes to some former mad scientists, is the easiest way to justify why they would target them. Now, we all know that Franky turned himself into a cyborg all on his own after being hit by the train taking Tom away in chapter 357. But what if he was already part cyborg even before that happened? After all, it seems like Judge trying to improve his kids in his own ways. Why wouldn't have Vegapunk done the same? In the following chapter, we get a glimpse of Franky, barely alive, floating in the water, mentioning how his body became hot. And no, I don't think it's because he's so hard-boiled, but because it could have been overheating from all the damage taken. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a huge empty and ruined ship happens to pass by. In my opinion, this is not a coincidence. We already know that sentient ships ships are a thing in the One Piece universe. In fact, the concept is introduced during the same saga. Besides the Going Merry, which is the most well-known example, and Big Mom's ship, which doesn't really count because it has a soul forcefully tied to it, we've seen the Thousand Sunny gaining some sort of sentience lately. More exactly, in chapter 911, when Luffy is talking to it as if it would be able to understand, we see the ship having some sort of expression which isn't really common for it. Anyway, back to Franky now. I believe that in his case, the ship which comes to aid him is Vegapunk's ship before he was captured by the government. Probably the same one on which Franky was raised on. This belief is amplified by how different it looks compared to some of the most well-known ships in the One Piece universe. It almost gives off a steampunk vibe, and the only similar ships that come to mind right now are Law's Polar Tang and Whitey Bay's ship, which is made out of metal because it's an icebreaker. It's easy to notice that the ship is old and was probably submerged at some point as well, because we can see something on the barrel laying on the deck. There are barnacles formed on it, and most barnacles live in shallow or tidal water. They usually attach themselves to the lower part of a ship or a boat, not on a barrel that appears to have not been in contact with the water since it's somewhere on the deck. One of the lines Franky uses is that he fits right in between the waste wood and scrap iron. Although he most likely refers to feeling like in Water 7, there's a chance that he fits right in just because he's also part scrap iron. Afterwards, he managed to turn himself into a cyborg, which is something that Vegapunk later on is shown to be able to do at a larger scale. I believe that Franky saw his father previously working on turning him, other people and other animals into cyborgs, and that's why he successfully manages to finish the whole surgery on himself. Even back when Tom found him for the first time on Water 7, he was surprised by how Franky managed to build a cannon out of rubbish. Another possibility is that the ship which came to save Franky was actually Pluton, but given the recent events and the reveal from chapter 1053, I find it more logical for it to be Vegapunk's former ship. However, if you'd like to explore that possibility, as well as read why Franky's ancestors could be the ancient shipbuilders, I'll leave a link in the description to the theory posted by the user A Ton of Harm. This theory was the main inspiration for my video as well, and it goes into detail about why it's not completely impossible for the ship to be Pluton. Before ending the video, I'd like to sum everything up and add a few more details which could support this theory. So we've established that Mads disbanded at least 24 years ago. It involved researching on how to modify humans, and both Queen and Judge somehow got away, but Vegapunk was the one who got caught, which is why I think he had to leave Franky behind, especially if he was already part robot. Otherwise, who knows, maybe he would have been the one being experimented on instead of Kuma. Later in life, Kuma sends Franky on Karakuri Island as per Vegapunk's instructions. We're led to believe that Franky explodes the whole lab by mistake, but by doing so he reveals an entirely new one where he gets access to more of Vegapunk's research. Plus, Karakuri Island has a history of creating cyborgs, as even the automata soldiers which end up on the moon are created on that island. When coming back to Saburi, Franky is the only one that gets to interact with Kuma, who has been fully modified by Vegapunk at this point, but recognizes Franky and lets the Straw Hats have their ship back, revealing that he protected it throughout the time skip. This is another moment in which Vegapunk allows Kuma to do things which might go against the will of the Marines, and he does so in order to protect the Straw Hats. Multiple times throughout the story, Vegapunk is described as a good person. It's only his inventions that do harm or that are used in malicious ways. And if that sounds familiar, it's because Franky has to deal with the same problem when his own ships are used in order to frame Tom in chapter 356. So far, most of the cyborgs we've met throughout the story are related to Vegapunk, and while there are a few that do not seem to be tied to him in any way, we don't know enough about them to draw this conclusion. Another funny detail is that Kuma's head covers the lower body of Vegapunk in the only panel we've ever seen of him, which could be intentional in order not to see that just as Franky, he's not wearing any pants. I know that while the timeline aligns, because Franky could easily have been 10 years old when he was abandoned, and that's close to when Mads had to disband, it's quite difficult to figure out how did they all meet, because although Vegapunk and Queen are both from the Grand Line and Judge was from North Blue but he could have reached the Grand Line through the Reverse Mountain, Franky was born in the South Blue and even remembers going up the Reverse Mountain in order to enter the Grand Line as a kid. But at the same time we have Roger's case, who was from Loketown, which is in East Blue, and Ace, his son, was born in Baterilla, which is in the South Blue. So it's not completely impossible for them to have traveled like that as well, especially since Vegapunk is the one who figured out that ships coated with sea stone can go through the Calm Belt without having to worry about the Sea Kings. Since we're anyway entering the last stretch of the story, I think that Vegapunk will be revealed very soon and we'll find out more about him and his possible connection to Franky. Thank you so much for checking out my video, and I'm sorry that my voice is all over the place. I've been recording this throughout multiple days and I'm having a pretty hard time figuring out the good setup for my microphone and how far to stay away from it in order to sound decent enough. Please feel free to drop your thoughts about this or any other theory in the comments section. With that being said, thank you once again for watching up until this point and see you on the next one. Take care everybody.